Okay, great. So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining on Saturday morning. I know it is your breakfast time and not a great time for hearing about Lebesgue integration and measure theory. But the title of the talk is Being Happy Without Lebesgue Integration and Measure Theory. So, hopefully, you can enjoy the ride. And again, just like last time, I'm going to take a different route and have a poetic sort of perspective and presentation. So a little different from the conventional mathematical presentation. So for those of you who were not there at the last presentation, would be a little bit different. So let's loosen up a little bit. Saturday morning, your time is Friday here. So I would start with, since the talk is about being happy without Lebesgue measure and Lebesgue integration and measure theory, I would like to hear what are some of the ways a mathematician can seek happiness in your opinion, and then I'm going to share what best answer I think or I liked for this question. So as I said last time, we are going to succeed when everybody is engaged. Me lecturing and you listening probably not going to work out. So what do you think are some of the ways a mathematician can seek happiness?
When you get the right solution.
Okay,
In the
actually,
first attempt.
Yes, sir.
in first attempt. Okay, challenging problems, right? Not simple ones, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I would modify that to saying when you get a solution which you think is right.
Yes. So I'm going to share the answer that I like the best. I declare myself to be happy. So then you're happy by definition. You don't have to rely on something else. Let's see how the second question goes. Why are you so happy? How would you, now that you've declared yourself happy, why are you so happy?
Because I learned, like, if I say that I am happy today, that will be because I want to be myself and I'm happy just the way I am. So
All right. So
that
here is
gives
my
me a reason.
favorite answer. I have no idea.
Oh, nice.
Okay. So the point here is, if you try to reason out why you're happy, then probably you can have some misconceptions. And I'm going to engage today's talk with one typical misconception that I'll be happy if I solve a challenging problem, right? So let's see how that works out. And we are going to challenge ourselves with one problem and see how it works out. And the problem looks like this. It is an integral 0 to 1 of x raised to root 2 minus 1 over ln x. Now, whoever has attended the last one, you say we have a man who is obsessed with putting root 2 in exponent. So part of it was intentional. In ideal scenario, I would actually let you work out this problem with elementary methods and try to see where it leads. For today, I'm going to do a little bit of a guided tour of what happens when you try to do elementary approaches towards this integral. Any first thoughts on this integral? Maybe some of you have seen this integral. I don't know. Have you?
No, not.
All right. So obviously that x raised to root 2 looks pretty ugly. So if you try, you might start feeling the discomfort with x raised to root 2. As I said, we have to keep our emotional side alive in this talk and always ask the question, where is my emotion going along with my logic? So after some frustration, you might say, let's try a simpler case first. So let's say you try to remove that root 2 and say, now, if it is x minus 1 instead of x raised to root 2 minus 1, does something pop up as what you want to try? The term that we don't like is ln x, right? If it was just x minus 1, life would be good. So why not try ln x is equal to t and then try to see where this integral goes. x will become e raised to t, dx will become e raised to t dt. Standard turn the crank, and the integral basically looks like e raised to 2t minus e raised to t over t dt. Now, when you reach this point, as I said, I would have let you try. The most experiential part will come when you actually try to work this thing out. I'm going to try to guide it a little bit. So looks like the key integral here is of the form e raised to t divided by t. If you have something like this in your elementary calculus, what comes to your mind? How about integration by parts?
Integration by parts. Right.
When you try something like integration by parts, one of the things that we'll end up doing is if you're dealing with e raised to t divided by t dt. Can you see my whiteboard?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, depending on how well your 12th professors or coaching classes or wherever you practice your calculus drilled it down. When I was a student, they used to drill down something like Liet or Ilet, or how many of you know what this term means?
Yes, sir. So choosing the first
Yeah, choosing the first.
function in integration by parts.
Yes, sir.
So if you just try what happens when you drew one of these things, so things like first function as it is, integral of second minus integral of derivative of first into integrated second function. Now again, try that here, and you will have first function as it is, integral of second minus integral of derivative of first into integrated second function. And soon you will realize that this doesn't look promising. Right? So when you see that this thing doesn't look promising, you want to look somewhere else. And what you might want to do is, okay, you have identified that this is the key integral. This thing looks like it is going to continue and not seem promising. Maybe we should try something else, right? How about we involve the infinite series for the exponential function? That seems like a different approach. So if you want to do e raised to t divided by t, and if you replace it with an infinite series, my question to you is, does it look any promising?
Yes, sir. Somehow we could mold it into some Taylor expansion.
So that if you take that 1 over t inside, right?
Yes.
Now, it seems like t raised to k minus 1 would be much easier to deal with and all that. So wait a second, is it going to be like k is equal to 0 would be a special case that will give you a log, and seems like we are headed towards t raised to k over k factorial kind of answer. Remember, we have ignored root 2, right? We are just trying to look for where this is going. But you know what? There is something here that we need to look carefully at, because when you take infinite series, can you see my so when you take, can you see my pointer? Or no?
No, not in full screen.
Okay. Can you see my
Wait, now I
cursor?
can. Yes.
Yeah. So when you take this inside, this infinite series actually is a limit, correct? So it is limit n going to infinity of this series. That is what this means. And when you take this 1 over t inside, you are actually taking the integral inside of this limit. And so a little bit on the shaky ground, because this is taking one limit inside another limit. And still, after we do that, the outcome is looking ugly. So you might have a little bit of head turning around saying, I don't know where this is going. So let's try
Sir?
something. Yes. Is there a question?
If you don't mind, could you again explain how this feels like the integral is going inside the limit? I didn't quite catch
So,
that.
so how did you get this answer in red? The ln t will come when you take this t inside. When k is equal to 0, there will be a
0.
1 over.
Yep.
And then remaining k's will become t raised to k minus 1. And you are taking the integral inside when it will become t raised to k divided by k.
Yes.
That's how you get this answer, correct?
Hmm.
But in order for that integral 1 over t to actually go inside, this sigma k is equal to 0 to infinity actually means that there is a limit n going to infinity k to n of this series, correct?
Yeah, like it only make sense if it was
Finite.
at some finite normal answer. Yeah.
Right. So when you try to conjecture this to be your answer, you have already taken some jumps over one limit going inside the other because integral itself is limit of a sum, correct?
Yes.
So this is basically taking the integral and letting it jump over the limit, over the summation, going inside, and then you got some answer. And even after you do so much of a circus, the answer is not looking pretty. So a little bit of a concern there, correct?
Oh wait. Okay. Yeah. I got it now. But yeah.
And remember, all this circus was done without root 2. So we are still not where we want to be, right? Are we on the same page that there is a little bit of a concern here?
Yes.
So now let's try something else. Nobody likes that root 2 because I kind of messed up your mind with something raised to root 2. So how about replace it with the p, right? If now instead of root 2 you start thinking about p, then the answer should be a function of p. So in other words, if p is treated as a parameter, the integral could be treated as a function of p. Okay. Now the moment you start thinking about function of p, now your instinct might tell you, oh, can we try something else? For example, what happens if you take the derivative with respect to p? Now, it still looks ugly, but question is there any promise in doing something completely different like this? You would want that d to the ddp to jump inside the integral. Now, again, we are jumping over some limit and going inside. The question is, this is again taking limit inside another limit. So derivative is going inside the integral. But is there any promise? Do you think there is any promise? The earlier effort, we tried something, but it was still looking ugly. Now we are trying something new, but after all this circus, is this looking promising at all?
I think so.
Yeah. So because if you take the derivative of x to the p minus 1 with respect to p, it's going to look like x to the p ln x. So now it looks promising, but still we don't have a smiley face here, right? So yeah, it looks promising. So you know what? Why not just carry it out? Okay, we know that there is a problem here, but let's see what happens if you actually do that. So it's promising. So carry out anyway, right? If you actually carry it out, you're going to land up integrating x to the p dx because ln x will cancel. And then you will have 1 over p plus 1. So you have di dp is equal to 1 over p plus 1. Is there a promise further? Yes, because now I can hope to integrate this back, right? I will say ip is equal to ln p plus 1 plus constant of integration. How do you determine constant of integration if this was going to work out? If you take p is equal to 0, then the integrand becomes x raised to 0, correct? And that x raised to 0 means what will happen to the integrand?
It will vanish.
Right, it will vanish. So therefore, I can say that I at p is equal to 0 is 0. Therefore, the constant of integration must be 0. and I have an answer. So IP is equal to ln p plus 1. And mind you, I am still worried. Why am I worried?
Finished.
I have not taken off the emoji from the slide. So question is this cheating? Is this answer correct? We don't know, right?
Hmm.
So at this point, what will bother you is, yeah, I did something, but I don't know if this answer is correct. Are we on the same page?
Yes.
So just like last time, remember, this talk is not your conventional mathematics talk. So I'm going to ask you to check on emotions. What I would like to know is, when you saw that done and when you landed up with that answer, where are your emotions? What are your emotions that you are experiencing? Or if you were to do this by yourself at 10:30 p.m. at night, what would go on in your emotional space? Can you tell me what are the possible emotions you are going to experience?
Yeah, I think one would be doubtfulness.
Doubtful, yes. Anything else? Yeah, I really want you to focus, because I want you to be engaged and tell me, if you were doing this, where are you emotionally? I'm going to share what some of the emotions I thought would be in my head and heart if I was in this place at night by myself when I was learning. Discomfort, right? I'm not sure, is it cheating? Is this real? Is the answer correct? That would be my first place to be at. I hope that some of you can connect to what I'm saying. So I would like to hear if there are some other expressions that are going on in your head as what you would go through, because this is about your experience.
Yes, sir.
Anything else? How about anxiety?
Yeah, I was just going to say anxiety actually. But yeah.
Great. So I don't know if this is going to work out. I'm not sure. Anything else?
Eager
Unhappy.
in a way to know whether it's correct or not.
Sorry, I couldn't hear. Can you repeat?
Eagerness to
Eagerness.
again venture on this path, whether it's correct or not.
So my third bullet was exhaustion. Eagerness is fair. You're eager to know how this will work out. One is exhaustion. It seems like this is going to be a lot of work to know if this will work out or not. But, then should I dare and say this is my best guess? And, at least it is better than saying I don't know. And your eagerness is something like wishful optimism. You might feel that I wish this was true, that would be pretty cool. But I wonder how you would go about establishing it. Like, how would you know that this will work out, and what are the conditions it will work out under? And you don't know. So you're in some space where you don't know, and you're somewhere on the spectrum. So I realized that as mathematics students, you're not comfortable somebody being in this place discussing emotions in the classroom and in the talk. So I decided that this is Friday night here, so I'm a little relaxed. It is Saturday morning here. I want to show you some unusual places where emotions are being discussed. So this is one place that you have my talk, where instead of talking about mathematics all the time, I'm coming back to emotions. Hopefully you will enjoy this unusual place where emotions are being discussed, because I found this pretty entertaining as a kid, and I hope that you'll get a good laugh. So let's play this out. All right, hopefully you found that to be a good laugh. Now, if not everybody might like Bruce Lee, I do. if Bruce Lee didn't do it for you, let's come back to mathematics and poetry. This is Carl Weierstrass. A real mathematician has to have the soul of a poet. This is not a simple statement. This is coming from Weierstrass, who is, who has done some rigorous establishment in analysis. He's considered father of modern analysis. Here's the second one. This is Henry Poincare. He seems to convey that creativity emerged by chance. Breakthrough would appear to pop up spontaneously. This is coming from not me, not some ordinary professor. It's coming from Poincare. Look at the second one. He opposed the views of Bertrand Russell, who believed that mathematics was a branch of logic. He is claiming that intuition was life of mathematics. If that is not enough, this is Michael Atiyah, Fields medalist in 1966, not too far back. Read what he's saying. In the broad light of day, mathematicians check their equations and their proofs, leaving no stone unturned in their search for rigor. But at night, under the full moon, they dream, they float among the stars and wonder at the miracle of heavens. They are inspired. Without dreams, there is no art, no mathematics, no life. This is not somebody ordinary, this is Michael Atiyah. To me, what this suggests, more than anything else, is these people have been as much of emotional beings as they are mathematicians and brilliant minds and logical beings. So, we can leave the fun in its own place when Bruce Lee says, don't think, feel. What I'm trying to tell you is in this talk, I want you to think and feel. And I'm not the only one who is focused on the emotions. There are some other people who seem to be talking about emotional expressions after they're done with some fantastic accomplishments. So hopefully, if not Bruce Lee, Michael Atiyah might do it for you. So back to our question. What does it take to establish that the procedures that we saw earlier in terms of taking that limit inside another limit of infinite sum or taking derivative inside the integral, how does that investigation go? So it turns out that to answer that question of when the procedures used in the previous trials of exchanging limits and derivative and integral, etc., are valid, we actually need to revisit our definition of the integral itself and redefine the concept of integral. So I know that I haven't walked you on the bridge where you would actually stumble and say, oh yeah, I need to re-examine the definition of the integral. You can do that. You can do the exploration yourself. What I'm trying to tell you for today is, in the interest of time, let's just take this leap of faith that in order to investigate the conditions under which you can take the derivative inside, you actually have to re-examine the definition of integral. And I'm going to walk again through what does it do when you start examining the definition of integral. Okay. Any questions so far?
No, sir.
Okay. So can somebody tell me what is your understanding of the integral? Let's talk about the definite integral because that was the problem we were dealing with. What is our understanding of the
Under
how
the
do we-
curve,
Sorry?
the area under the curve.
Area under the curve,
Yeah.
correct. Anything else that comes to mind?
Antiderivative.
Antiderivatives.
Correct. So we have antiderivative, we have area under the curve, and essentially what it comes down to is integral as
Yeah.
a limit sum, correct?
Continuous
sum-
summation, like how the Riemann integral works.
Right. So if you have, a curve like this, then you're going to subdivide the interval AB and try to do integration as limit of a sum. And that sum has a particular structure to it, right? This notion, this way of thinking about the integral is called the Riemann integral. And the structure of that sum is that you have value and you have the size of the subinterval.
Winter.
Correct? Everyone with me so far?
Yes, sir.
So,
Yeah. Now, the absolute minimum that you would expect from your notion of integral is that since it inherently has size of the subinterval in the definition, if your value of the function was 1, the minimum thing that you want, the simplest thing you may expect is that your integral should be able to represent the size of an interval, right? If fx is equal to 1, then it should represent the size of the set on which f is 1. That's the simplest expectation you have, right? From the last lecture, we know that some of the things that we take for granted, when we start questioning, some strange things start to happen. So are we sure that we understand what we mean by the size? That is the question where my attention is going to go. And the integral, the way it is defined here, the question is, does it represent size correctly? Are you clear about the questions in red? So if f is equal to 1 on certain set, this notion of integral, is it going to give you a good sense of the size of that set? And do we understand what we mean by size? Just like when I asked, what do you mean by 2 raised to 2? That's the kind of questioning we are about to engage in. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to start with a simple function. For a given set S1, this is called a characteristic function of S1, where it is 1 if a given x belongs to S1, and it is 0 if x does not belong to S1. So essentially, it is an indicator function which says, is the x that you gave in set S1 or it is not in set S1? Simple definition. So if I integrate such a function, which is the characteristic function of set S1, I could get the size of S1, right? That's our basic expectation, right? Are you with me?
Yes.
So if you're dealing with nice behaving creatures, right? If you're dealing with somebody who is behaving nicely, things usually are not disruptive. So for example, if I define S1 to be set of all x, such that x is between 0 and half, you know that this function is going to look nice. It's a nice step function. And if I integrate the characteristic function over 0 to 1, right? I should have chi here instead of f1, but since the plot has f1, I said integral 0 to 1 f1. The answer is half. And we can do the Riemann integral sum and kind of show that the limit will go to half. Any doubts about that half? Very straightforward. Right?
No,
Yes,
sir.
Yes. Somebody else has a doubt?
No.
no, sir.
Okay, good. But this is when you have some nice behaving creatures like the step function, right? What happens when you deal with some pathological cases? And the pathological case that I'm going to bring in here is our friend where gx is equal to 1 if x is a rational number and is equal to 0 if x is irrational number. Okay. Now this is again an indicator function telling you whether x is a rational number or an irrational number. So we are stuck in irrationality again here, right? And the question is the same. What is the answer to 0 to 1 g of x dx? In other words, what is the size? The question is about size, right? Because when you have indicator function, it tells you the size of the set. What is the size? What is the space occupied by rational numbers? Is it like half and half? Is it like 1/4? Any guesses? So the question is, we don't know what is the size of this set. Let's carry out Riemann integration, right? So you will write this as integral of a limit of a sum. What will happen if you try to take this limit?
So one second, which limit of this
So-
of the g of x function?
Right. So we know that this integral, according to Riemann integration, is limit of a sum, correct?
Hmm.
Mm.
If you try to carry out that limit,
Hmm.
what will happen?
So would it be 0 because we know that irrational numbers are uncountable, they're like in some way greater in cardinality than rational numbers. So
Yeah. The
somewhat.
question is, if you try to carry out that integration and try to take the limit, you draw the little strips under the curve, what you will start noticing is that your strips and the curve is broken everywhere, correct?
Yes.
So can you actually take a limit in a meaningful manner? The strips, as they start shrinking, they cannot meaningfully go between rational and irrational numbers because your function is broken everywhere, right? So this function is discontinuous everywhere because there are holes all over the place. Can you actually carry out this integral as integral of a limit of a sum? Because for limit to exist, think about if you were to carry out limiting process for this step function from left and right, what would happen at x is equal to half? The limit will not exist, right, on the left-hand side curve. Because on the bottom, the limit will go to 0 from the right, and from the left, the limit will go to 1. So at x is equal to half, for the function drawn in this box, the limit does not exist, correct? Are we convinced that limit does not exist at x is equal to half in this figure?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So for this f1, limit as x goes to half does not exist. So if this is the case when one step down has occurred, now you can imagine that if this is broken everywhere between 0 and 1,
Limit shouldn't
it's
exist.
possible to take the limit, correct?
Yes.
So therefore, the integral does not exist as a Riemann integral since the subdivision and limit of the sum cannot be meaningfully carried out. So right there, what has happened is Riemann integration has failed to represent size of certain sets. It cannot represent the size of rational numbers. You cannot say rational numbers occupy half the space, right? So the answer is not half. Then what is the answer? So the first lesson that we learn is the integral, as we know, has problem. It cannot represent even size, which was our minimum expectation of an integral. Or at least there are some sets where the size becomes a problem, right? So this takes us back to questioning what we started walking with. So again, if you check on emotions, your foundation is shaken and you are then awakened. The worldview is broken when granted things are taken. Now you are in a pretty weird space where what you thought, what you learned all along as your standard integral has come in question. So we have to reconstruct what we know. And I'm going to start with a simple question. What is the first rational number in 0, 1?
0.
Yeah. Sorry?
0.
Okay.
0.
What is the second?
That's tough.
No one knows.
Can't answer that, right?
You can't answer.
They are there everywhere.
Hmm.
But now I'm going to propose a very different arrangement of rational numbers. And somebody mentioned countability. So let's arrange rational numbers like this, where the top row and the first column, these are all positive integers. And if you go to like column 1 and row 2, then you can enter the rational number as half. And you can do half, 1/3, 1/4, 1/5. You can fill this table. And the lower half of this infinite table is all possible rational numbers in the interval 0, 1. Are we in agreement with that? Everything, all rational numbers, they must occupy some space in this table in the lower triangle.
Yes.
Correct? Any doubts? There may be some repeats, like this half will repeat as 2/4, but there is nothing that is omitted. Everything that is P/Q is somewhere in that lower triangle in 0, 1. Correct?
Yes.
So now I can answer, I can take this 1 to be my first rational number, and then I can start walking down a second, third, fourth, fifth, 6, 7, 8, 9. I can do this. So I can arrange rational numbers in this sequence and start answering the question, which is my first rational number, second, third, fourth. I can arrange the entire set of rational numbers. And of course, I can mindfully omit whenever it is a repeat. So if I have 2/4, I will skip it because 1/2 already occurred. So as long as I skip the repeat, I can arrange this. And what I have is a map from natural numbers to rational numbers, which means I have arranged all possible rational numbers in interval 0, 1 in a sequence. Are you walking with me on this line that the whole, in everything in that 0, 1, whatever is the rational number, has now been arranged in the sequence. And this is what we mean by the rational numbers in 0, 1. That set is countably infinite because it has to continue to infinity, but it is countable, as in you can say this is first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can continue that. Okay. If we were talking about integrals, then we question integrals, and suddenly I'm talking about countability. What does this have to do with our original question? I'm about to tell you what it does and what are the implications. So this is one of the implications of countability of rationals. What you have is all rational numbers in 0, 1 are arranged in sequence A0, A1, A2, everything. If you do that, I will go through a mental exercise and draw a tiny open interval of size epsilon by 2 around the first rational number, epsilon by 2 square around the second rational number, epsilon by 2 cube around the third, and I can continue this process to infinity. Any questions on the second bullet? This is a mental exercise. I'm just drawing little tiny intervals on first, second, third, fourth rational number. Are we on the same page?
Yes. Sir.
All right. If you do that, then the question is, what is the total length of the segment that you need to cover all rational numbers? How will you find it? It will be just addition of these lengths, right? Epsilon by 2 square, correct? The total length needed should be the addition of all these little tiny segments, correct? If you're not
So how do we know these are disjoint intervals? I mean, it seems like it would be, but
they can overlap. My question is, to cover all rational numbers, you need, like, you could need less than the addition of all this. That is your question, right?
yeah.
But you at least, like,
Yeah,
you can say, if I use the entire length, epsilon by 2 plus epsilon by 2
should be
square,
enough.
should be enough, right?
Yeah.
So what is this sum? This sum is actually the infinite geometric series. And the answer is actually epsilon.
Oh.
If an insect jumps to half, 1/4, 1/8, if it does that, it can never pass unit length, right? So if it is epsilon by 2 square, epsilon by 2 cube, the infinite geometric series will tell you that the total length that you used is epsilon. But epsilon is what? An arbitrary small number. So what does this mean? This means that on your line segment 0, 1, what is the size occupied by rational numbers? It is arbitrarily small.
Yeah, it is however small you want it. could be.
So the total length occupied by all rational numbers in 0, 1 is negligibly small. Most of it is occupied by irrational numbers. So yes, rational numbers are there everywhere, but the total length that you need to cover rational numbers is actually arbitrarily small. In language of measure theory, we just encountered the first concept where we say rational numbers form a set of measure 0. Okay? So their size, if you wanted to assign a notion of size to the rational numbers, then you need to assign the number 0. They occupy negligible space on 0, 1. Most of it is irrationals. So most of the life on interval 0, 1 is coming from irrationality. Rationality is negligible. All right? Keep checking on your emotions. That is important. So where does this lead us? What about our integral? We wanted to integrate that characteristic function of rationals, right?
Yep.
What does it mean? So we have the characteristic function. We wanted to define it on the rational versus irrational. And the question was, what is integral 0 to 1 gx dx? And remember, this answer is supposed to represent what? The
Size of rationals.
So what should be the answer? If integral was to represent the size, the answer should be what?
0.
0.
So you're going to say that that integral is in two parts. If you integrate on, so remember the function, so the limit that we took had the structure value multiplied by the size of the subinterval, correct? Instead of the subinterval, now it should be value multiplied by the size of the set. So it is value 1 on a set which has measure 0, and it is value 0 on a set of measure 1. And therefore, if you think in terms of value and size, then the integral should be declared to be 0. And remember, this integral did not exist as a Riemann integral sum. Therefore, this way of thinking in terms of the value of the function and associated size of the set is what is called Lebesgue integration. This is a complete redefinition of our notion of integral. Okay, so we encountered the concept of measure 0, and the next one we stumbled upon is now we have a completely new definition of what we mean by an integral, which is called Lebesgue integration. Okay, so now I'm going to give you some cursory look at some concepts in measure theory. I will be a little fast because I know that many people kind of don't like this kind of language to stare at on the slide. They are better off reading it by themselves in the book. So first of all, in measure theory, you will end up extending the real number system by adding the symbols plus infinity, minus infinity, and defining some operations so that your real line has the two infinity extends added, and this is called extended real number system. So remember, now we are in the process of enhancing our prior vision, right? We understood integral in a limited sense. Now we have changed that definition. We want to, again, just like complex numbers, real and rational, we want to go through the process of enhancing our understanding of the world we are in when it comes to integrals. So first, extended real number system. Then we have a function whose values are in the extended real numbers, which means plus infinity, minus infinity included. These are called extended real valued functions. Then we come to defining what is called an outer measure. And what this is it looks ugly, but look at what is being said. You first find a set of open intervals that cover the given set A. And then there is a sum of lengths. So this is sum of lengths of all of those intervals that were used to cover, and you take the infimum. Now you can go look up your analysis book about what the infimum is, but intuitively it is the same thing that we did with rationals, where we covered them with the intervals and then asked, if I start shrinking those intervals, how small do I have to go? That is the lower limit that you're taking. That is the infimum. And that total length that you need to cover in the limit going down is the measure. So this is the notion of your size of the set. Once you're done that, then you require that whatever function you define to be a measure. So this can be done, for example, if you have a two-dimensional space, then area measure is something that we intuitively connect to. But volume is another measure that you connect to. So whatever function you define as a measure on a set should satisfy certain properties. So you will see some conditions mentioned like this for a set to be called measurable and for a function to be used as a measure. And then there is a concept of a measurable function. And this is again, a function is called Lebesgue measurable if these are the sets that are measurable. Okay, so fx greater than alpha is measurable, greater than or equal to alpha is measurable, so on and so forth. I'm not going to go into why you need all these fancy terms in this definition. My point is, once you start digging deeper, asking fundamental questions about your notion of size, this is the kind of stuff that comes out that you need in order to meaningfully define your notion of size and meaningfully redefine your notion of integral. Okay, so Lebesgue integral of a simple function. So this is the formal definition of what we did on the characteristic function for rationals. So a simple function is basically a function that takes only finite number of values and can be expressed as some summation of the characteristic function, which means simple function in layman terms is bunch of step functions. It is not a nice looking function, it is bunch of step functions because there are only finitely many values. And then again, the structure is the same, value and the size. Okay, so the integral is defined to be value multiplied by size added over all of these finitely many values. This is the Lebesgue integral of simple function. At this point, you might wonder, okay, there's a lot of circus going on here. And we went from step function and the size of rationals to redefine this integral as value times the size, where for the size, we introduced some new notions and all that, right? All that happened in 3 slides very fast. In a course that, maybe Professor Ravi Rao will offer, it will not happen this fast. My question is, or your question may be, okay, all of this happened, and we are told that more formal development is needed to define the Lebesgue integral rigorously, which some of your professors will do. And you are rightfully going to ask, okay, but what is this circus about? Is this going somewhere, or we are just going to go do some gymnastics here, right? To define the Lebesgue integration, essentially what has happened is we have discretized the range instead of the domain. In other words, in Riemann integral, you were discretizing the domain and drawing these rectangles. And in Lebesgue integration, you picked simple functions based on the value. So you are actually discretizing the range. And for each of these levels, you are associating a corresponding size of the set. So when you see an expression like value times the size is the definition of the integral, you have completely switched your perspective from domain to range. So in other words, instead of looking on x-axis, you started looking on y-axis. And you are doing value times size, because now you can define the notion of size in a very different manner than our conventional length. Is this distinction clear? Now you may still ask, okay, you did some fancy stuff by changing the axis, so what? But before I say so what, are we clear on what this is? Any questions?
So I just don't get the diagram on the right. You're discretizing the range, but your rectangles are somehow still vertical.
Correct. So think about one of the terms on the previous slide. Let's say A1, MA1, okay? What is A1? A1 is one of the values taken by the function, correct?
So one of the members of the range.
Yeah, one of the members of the range. And you are taking the size of the set corresponding to that value and multiplying them, correct?
Oh, so how many points take up that value?
So if you take this level, then this level taken by this size is the answer that you're using in that sum.
Oh,
This discretization on the x-axis is sort of dependent on the level that you choose. For example, for
choose.
this level, the size is going from 0.4 to 0.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, you understand?
While
what
it was uniform on the
Correct.
left-hand side. Okay, yes, got it.
Started here discretizing the domain, whereas now you are
The
focusing
range
on,
is.
okay, and you are now going backwards and saying, okay, for this value, what is the size of the set? And that is a completely different way of defining the integral. Okay.
Yes.
Turns out that if you do this kind of circus and go on the y-axis, you can answer some questions better. So what does this framework buy us? First of all, you can see that the function that I presented as characteristic function of rationals was not integrable as Riemann integration, but it is integrable as a Lebesgue integration. So it provides you a larger class of functions that become integrable. Then it also enables more meaningful investigation of when limits can go inside the integrals and all those kind of phenomena that we talked about in the beginning of the class. So you have to do all this circus and gymnastics to be able to investigate this in a more systematic manner. And finally, the condition under which differentiation under the integral can happen, as in the derivative can pass on the other side of the integral, is something that comes out of a famous theorem, which is Lebesgue dominated convergence theorem. And that theorem is basically founded in this framework. So to order that question that we started with, and to get rid of our anxiety about, is this going to work out and what does it take for it to work out? So it is with these non-trivial insights that we got. It is only then that you can claim, or you can get that pleasure of claiming that your understanding of our integration problem has some degree of completion. Without that, you're going to have a bit of a sleepless night thinking, yeah, I got the answer, but I don't know whether this is true, whether this is cheating, under what condition it works out, I don't know. In order to get out of that, you need to go through development of measure theory and redefine the integral. Now you know that rationals and irrationals, now your perspective of what is the occupancy on the interval has changed. Everything in your real world now appears different because you have a completely different insight into what happened. Any other thoughts on where you are emotionally on this? I shouldn't say any other thoughts, any other feelings. Any comments? Do you understand the claims in the 3 bullets here?
Right.
So, first of all, larger class has become integrable. Secondly, this is where the limiting of sequences of functions is going to be looked at very differently. And what I'm trying to tell you is that now this is the framework that is going to be needed in order to address when the derivative can go inside that integral. Okay. So with that, I'm going to tell you, when you do all this, now an unexpected relative arrives. And that relative is something that I didn't even mention. I just mentioned that you can use like area, length, all these functions of sets as measure. Turns out that probability can also be thought of as a measure. The value of that measure always lies between 0 and 1. And essentially what you're doing in probability can be thought of as you're picking some subset of sample space and then assigning some size to it. How likely are these events? Is the size assignment to the set. So you can think about probability completely in terms of measure theory. The question is, can probability theory be entirely developed using measure theoretic framework? The answer is yes. This was done in 1933. And remember, this is like going from real numbers to complex numbers where your view is now much more complete. So you may rightfully ask at this time, is there any advantage of redefining probability using measure theory? You're right in asking that question. What can happen is when you redefine probability using measure theory, some very non-trivial random phenomenon can become accessible for your analysis. So for example, right now we are thinking in terms of tossing of coins and balls and dice and all that. Suppose I tell you that pick a continuous function on 0, 1 randomly and integrate from 0, 1. That is your random process. If you started thinking about probability of this process, you have no handle on how to handle these continuous functions and set of continuous functions and any size of these sets. When you land up in this place where you have no such handle, you need to walk in the framework of measure theory to meaningfully talk about these random phenomena. So is there any advantage in redefining probability using measure theory? Yes. So it enables expanding our prior notions to different random processes. And also, you can think very differently about sequences. In real analysis, you talk about AN tending to F. But in terms of random variables, now you can talk about some random variable almost certainly approaches some value, which means there will be cases where it doesn't go there. But those cases will be sets of measure 0. We know what set of measure 0 looks like rational numbers. So it enables very different look into the convergence processes, weak convergence, strong convergence. It opens up a completely different perspective on your prior ways of thinking. So we are not going to be able to walk into the details of how this plays out. I just thought that you're dealing with integrals, trying to redefine the sense of size, going through the exercise, and suddenly you also find out that there is entirely different way to introduce measures when it comes to probability, and both shake hands in an unusual place. So coming back to being happy. So you've been through a tour here. This was like a crash course in some concepts. And I just want to have this slide because the title was being happy without measure theory and Lebesgue integration. So here are my takeaways. First of all, you can be happy without knowing Lebesgue integration or measure theory. That's a wrong connection to say that you need to do something with them. In fact, you can be happy without even knowing Riemann integration, right? So just declare yourself happy. Don't try to reason out. And when you face challenges, that's when you need some non-trivial insights to change your view of the world. And that's when your new perspective will bring pleasure. If you just want to be happy, don't reason, declare yourself happy. Okay? What I'm going to do is, since I said it is a poetic introduction with all these emotions, I'm going to talk about, read 2 poems from my book. Hopefully, you will now see the poem very differently. If I read the poem before the lecture, probably you would not connect to these 2. So these are the 2 last readouts from this book, which you can buy on Amazon. The title of the poem is Differentiation Under the Integral Sign. Differentiation under the integral, was it a crime of thoughts? Adamant of integrals claimed it was intercourse of sorts. The privilege of the constants was abused by the derivative. Challenging integrals fought their case with this narrative.
Where is the poem?
Sorry?
I can't see the poem.
Yeah, I'm not displaying the poem. I'm just reading it out of the book.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll go again.
Yeah.
Differentiation under the integral, was it a crime of thoughts? Adamant of integrals claimed it was intercourse of sorts. The privilege of the constants was abused by the derivative. Challenging integrals fought their case with this narrative. You were hiding a parameter inside the integrand. New techniques had to be brought, claimed the first defendant. Integrals decided to defend the pristine fort. The case was then moved to proceed in Lebesgue's court. Riemann's old sum had failed to defend the case. Dominated convergence had shaken integral's base. Sets of measure 0 had cast functions in a class. Limiting of sequences had obtained the required pass. With limits on their side, derivatives followed. Parameters in integrands were elegantly swallowed. The case was then closed. With Lebesgue, integrals were hosed. Analysts then rejoiced, and in textbooks, this technique was posed. That's differentiation under the integral. And I promise that these poems will draw some parallels with life experiences. So here is the second one. This is the last one for today. The title of the poem is Measure Zero. On a Sunday evening with a cup of tea, deconstructing my world one moment at a time, it dawned upon me that towards my own self, I was about to commit a smooth crime. Rationality of Monday will consume me in a few hours, I thought. I will wake up tomorrow and mindlessly say to the day, I am all yours. I walk along an interval, a continuum, practicing my notion of empty space, sprinkled along were such rationales, ignoring the residuum that morphed this walk into an irrational race. The characteristic function of my time evolved when with characteristic function of such rationales it convolved. There is plenty of room at the bottom, claimed one who I saw as my hero. He spoke of taking the atoms apart with an insight into the continuum, sublime and thorough. With a warm sip out of my cup on the empty beach, a Lebesgue integral then shined, better than the setting sun and the twilight, like a wave splashing over to reach. My heart ran around to beseech. With my breath confined, I could not recall a thing as my week's highlight. An insight from the Lebesgue integral I was then prepared to borrow. The empty space between and within atoms will dictate my understanding of the material for tomorrow. I then made up my mind to not live my life in densely spaced rational instances of measure zero. Thank you. Right? That was
Thank
it.
you very much, sir.
Thank you.
It was lovely. Are there any discussions? Anybody anything to ask or shall?
Yes, Gurmeet has his raised
Gurmeet,
hand.
go ahead. Unmute yourself. Where is
Sir?
Gurmeet? Yes.
No.
Where is Gurmeet? I don't see her.
No, I saw Gurmeet raising hand or something. So I thought he
was
wants to
clapping.
speak.
Gurmeet. Okay.
No, so that was a clap emoji.
Oh, I see. I thought it was raising hand. Thank you.
No, sir. No, that was a clap emoji.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir.
Thank you
It
very
was
much
Thank you,
for
sir.
lovely sessions.
Thank
I'm
you,
sure
sir.
we'll
amazing.
keep
Why
coming
didn't
back
you
to you.
write the poem?
Sorry?
Why didn't you display the poem?
Oh, I didn't have time to retype. I should have.
Oh, retype is required. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I should have actually. But, just didn't get time to do
I
that.
thought it was too long or something.
Oh, yeah.
And
Hopefully
you-
that will, motivate people to buy the book.
Yes.
What about Cantor? You kept on asking me about Cantor.
No, I wanted to know what was the exposure of students to some of these notions. So I chose some limited topics because it was 1 hour, not too much. I didn't want to pack too much. So we could
Okay,
talk about
okay.
Cantor also, but we didn't want to overwhelm students with a lot of information in compressed time.
You know, Kolmogorov came to ISI, Kolkata.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
He was a great influence in that place. I think there's a building, no? Nikhilesh will know.
Yes. Kolmogorov Bhavan is the StatMath unit is there.
Wow,
He's one of the greats.
interesting. All
So
right.
shall we close the session for now? I'm sure we'll keep asking you to come back, sir. It was absolutely brilliant. But
Thank
we
you
will
very
work
much.
through and come back to you again. It was absolutely brilliant, and thank you very much for everything. Thank you,
A
sir.
very good
Thank you very much.
perspective on our courses also, and
Yes.
the way we develop our courses. So they gradually come to measure theory and learn that. And this talk will be in their background now that you have spoken it, how we are doing things, because we rarely explain why we are doing it. We just do it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be
Thank you
happy.
very much. Kedar, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Whenever you
We
feel
can't
like,
thank you enough.
tell us,
It was
we'll
really
unable to.
perspective.
And I'll be very happy to interact again in whatever form.
Yes, I think we will request you again, but just let me work through the timetable a little more, and then we'll come back to you. But we
Thank you.
will really, really feel enriched by your session. I'm sure the students did. And we would want more of that experience, definitely, most certainly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. So shall we
And
close
Shraddha,
for
thank
now?
you for coming.
Yes, sir. Shall we close the session for now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very
Have a
much.
good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
No,
you.
we will keep, believe me, this is not our last thank you. We'll keep coming back to you because it's absolutely brilliant. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, sir.